Greetings, fellow mammals. Welcome back. Before we dive right into it, a few words on what this video will not cover and a brief overview regarding the structure. This guide is mainly for PC players, simply because I have never owned a console nor a controller in my entire life, and therefore it would be foolish of me to give you any recommendations in that regard. And it also focuses on the multiplayer portion because I don't care about the Battle Royale and I also don't care about this Gauntlet mode. Still, a lot of the general tips and tricks in here will be relevant for console players as well as the BR and Gauntlet enjoyers. Regarding the structure, we will start by fixing some basic Windows mischief, then a few little tweaks to the game files, and then we will actually open the game and go through the options top to bottom. The chapters of this video also reflect the pages of the settings menu, so make use of that if you are looking for something specific. Oh, and I will only cover settings which I actually changed. You can tell by those little squares right next to them. Otherwise we would be here for hours. Should you have questions about things I did not cover, please put them in the comments. Obviously, any other questions you might have too. And if they are really extensive, why don't you just join my Discord server so we can have a more direct conversation? Link down below. With that preamble out of the way, let's start with some basics. Open the Windows settings and type mouse into the search bar. Then go into the mouse settings here and make sure that this little switch for the enhanced pointer precision is set to off. Next up, we are searching for game. Open the game mode settings here and then turn this on. Same thing for graphics. Now go into the graphics settings, expand this little thing and set this switch to on too. And last but not least, we can simply go one step back from here into the display settings, scroll down to the advanced display settings, and inside this drop down menu you just have to select the highest number there is for you. And that's it for the Windows basics. Now before we open up the game, there are two more things to do, and for that we have to get into the game files. For the first one, you need to navigate to your Documents folder. In here there should be a Battlefield 6 folder, and inside that one is this Settings folder. And if you have the game through the EA app, you will find this profsave_profile file right here. If you have it through Steam, you should have an additional Steam subfolder, so that's just one additional step. Wherever it is for you, open up this profsave profile, the simple text editor is fine, and in here you want to press Ctrl and F to open up the search bar, and we are looking for weapon DOF. That should take you right here, and all we want to do here is change the default 1 you should have there into a 0 like I have. Then save the file and close it. Now the other little thing. This has to be done inside the game's main folder, the place where you installed it to. For me that's the regular Steam route. So C drive, program files, Steam, Steam apps, common, and there we have Battlefield 6. Once you found the equivalent on your end, you need to create a new text file in here and rename it to user.cfg. It's important that you delete the .txt ending, otherwise it won't do anything. Once you have that, open it up, and now we want to write these 3 lines in there. Don't worry, you don't have to type these out yourself. I put all of them in the video description down below, so just copy them from there. One important thing before we can save and close this is that you bring up your task manager, navigate to the CPU page inside the performance view, and then you have to check how many cores you have. It should tell you right here. That is the number you have to put behind the third line in this config file, Thread.ProcessorCount. For me, as you can hopefully see, it's pretty small, that would be 8. If you have something else there, change it. Once that is done, save it and close the config file. And now we are ready to actually open up the game and go through the in-game options. The first page in here is the accessibility one. If you have been wondering why this slightly annoyed sounding robot lady is constantly blabbering in your ears, then turn off menu narration right here. The subtitles are mostly irrelevant for multiplayer, so I didn't touch them, but you can of course just turn them off entirely or adjust them to your liking in this submenu. This tinnitus slider is a great addition to make flashbangs less annoying, and that's why I turned it all the way down. And next up we got something rather important, at least to me personally, the colors. but in the end these are completely tied to your dis or A abilities and of course taste. Most importantly though, even if you like the default colors, I would still put this to custom so you can increase the saturation a bit. By default they are slightly washed out and just not optimal for visibility. However, I myself do use some rather different ones, so here we go. The primary color refers to the UI. I like this to be a clear white. The player color should not be the same as the squad color, so I use cyan. The friendly color is for your team. I prefer white again over blue here. I just think it looks better. And the squad stays in the good old bright green. Next one is the enemy color. This stays red, but like full red, not washed out. And for the neutral color, I like this beige, sort of ivory, almost gold type of vibe. For this exact one I go to the orange part of the bar and then I aim for the top middle essentially. The accent and warning color are both plain orange. And that's it for this submenu, so let's move back out. Next up we got some camera effects, and that's where a lot of distracting stuff originates from. Turn down all of this motion blur garbage, turn off the HUD motion, reduce the camera shake as much as it lets you, turn on this camera wobble reduction, turn off chromatic aberration, and probably most important of them all, turn off this horrible crosshair projection. And now back to the main page. You might have noticed by now that every time we go back, the game moves us all the way up to the top again, which thankfully is not annoying at all. Yet. Back to where we were, we get to another submenu for the controls. Infantry sprint on hold, because that's how I play every game. Crouch toggle sprint to crouch. Actually rather important this one, because it lets you enter the crouch sprint from a crouched position. You don't have to stand up first. You'd think that would be the default, but I guess not. Vehicle boost to hold, so it feels more like a gas pedal, and setting the skip revive to toggle is a carryover of mine from Battlefield 5 and 2042. Thankfully they have set the request revive to toggle by default now, so I guess they got half of it right. Now we may leave this menu again and boom, back at the top, so here we were. As I said in the intro, I don't know anything about controllers, so I'm going to skip over this section, and for the chat and the tutorials I didn't touch anything either. For the hints I just changed two small things. I turned off the peek hints as well as the ping hints. Both are just unnecessary clutter. And that covers it for the accessibility chapter. So let's move on to the gameplay one now. In here I turn off all inverted cameras, and I am just going to quickly open the submenu again for anyone that skipped to this point in the video, because we just covered all of this in the last section and this will happen many more times. A lot of the settings appear at multiple points throughout these pages, but I will not repeat myself every single time they come up, so just look out for the little squares if you are skipping around. For the hints I just decreased the size a bit, and now we get to some of the more meaty parts of this page. The infantry sensitivity. The top bar is actually for the controller. They did write mouse in the bottom one, but I guess they couldn't write controller in the top one for some reason. Naja. If you just want to have the same sensitivity as you had in older Battlefield titles, according to Florian here, who is a developer working at DICE, you just have to double the value you had before. There are some replies to this tweet though, where people claim it's actually 3 times as much and not 2, so take from that whatever you will. And by the way, before I forget it, thanks to Get Memed on LOL in my Discord server for quickly finding this tweet for me again. Now, personally, I slightly adjusted my sensitivity, going from Florian's proposed double amount, which would have been 6 to 6.5, because I want to have those lovely 42 centimeters on the right there, because that's what I use in other games. And because of the buggy history of this franchise, I also set the controller slider to the exact same value. That's part of something I get more into a bit later in this video. Here we mostly have returning stuff, but there is one new thing that's pretty neat. You can disable the camera roll when you do a safe landing from a considerable height. Quite neat. And now we get to the vehicle sense. Same spiel here again. Top is controller, bottom is mouse. So far I have been using a sensitivity of 10 here, but that might be subject to change once I fly a bit more. But before that happens, they will have to rebalance the entire vehicle mechanics first. The jet and helicopter control sense should be all the way to the max, so you get them as nimble as possible, and the helicopter control assist should be off. Decoupling the turret from the chassis is a must, so you can stay on target while turning, and here we finally have the often discussed aim assist. I can't tell you anything about aim assist, but long-term viewers may remember that in 2042 the aim assist was actually interfering with your mouse input. And the question now is, do you believe, or rather trust, that DICE has completely eliminated that bug? Well, I don't. But just so we are clear, this might be all placebo at this point. So, what I did here is just the same as in 2042 in order to fix that interference. Basically, you just get all the sliders down to 0. And that's it for the gameplay section. Next up is the HUD. I think we had infantry HUD motion before, but we didn't have vehicle HUD motion before. It's already becoming hard to track, honestly. However, I want both turned off. HUD padding could be interesting to you if you use an ultrawide monitor like me, otherwise don't touch it. And now we get to another important little submenu to explore. Set the big map opacity to 25 so you can see through it while flying, and I turned on this resources info here because that way I can tell who is giving me ammo. Not really relevant, but I like the feature. For the vehicle HUDs I use a bright pink because that is just the easiest color to read against pretty much any background, and this icon intensity slider here is a bit misleading and also buggy. 2 patches ago this slider worked 100%. 1 patch ago it didn't work at all. And now it works like 80%. So what does it even do? Icon intensity regulates the amount of glow around every single UI icon. That's why I turned this all the way down to 0, which made for a beautiful clean experience. Well, at least 2 patches ago. Now, even with it still at 0, some things just keep glowing. Objective icons and your health bar, for example. I hope this gets fixed soon because I much preferred when it was working. The objective icons can be made a little smaller and also more see-through, and unfortunately these are also a bit buggy because neither the occluded nor zoomed sliders do anything. DICE, please fix. For the meantime, I will still keep these values here so I don't have to change them whenever they patch this. The general idea for this entire section is that I want to remove every non-gunfight relevant UI element from the screen whenever I aim down sights. This would obviously include the objective icons, but as I just told you, those aren't working at the moment. The friendly icon sliders thankfully are working though, so I made them a bit smaller, a tiny bit translucent while aiming, and I also made the revive icons way smaller and much more transparent because in comparison to the default alive dot above teammates' heads, the revive icon is enormous. And when you aim, you intend to shoot. You don't need to see dead teammates while doing that. The exact same logic applies to the squad icons, of course, and that's why this is a one-to-one copy of the friendly section. For the enemies, I didn't touch anything. Some of you may remember that I increased the scale to the maximum in 2042. And yes, that was helpful there, but here I find the icons are weirdly placed in relation to the actual player model, and making them even bigger just makes that worse. Neutral icons can be a little smaller and slightly see-through, even more so when zoomed of course, and now you might be wondering why I didn't put this slider to 0 then. That's because even when I am aiming, I want to be able to tell if a vehicle in the distance is empty or actually an enemy vehicle that just isn't spotted. And all the way down at the bottom here we have something rather important actually. This should look pretty different to what you have right now, and that's because I fundamentally disagree with this entire feature. So what even is this? Well, to break this down into simple terms, these sliders here define 2 zones on your screen with different opacity levels. That means that an icon could become more transparent the further it moves towards the edges of your monitor. In my opinion, that just makes the UI feel unreliable and inconsistent. I like to have the exact same visibility all over my screen, no matter where I am looking or what angle something is at. And that's what these values here represent. Essentially, this removes the 2 zones entirely and makes everything the same opacity no matter where it is. After all, we can still set each individual opacity for all of the icon types anyway. We just spent 2 minutes doing exactly that. Now that we are done with the icons, let's exit this again and scroll back to where we left. The minimap is pretty important, and unfortunately this section has seen some major downgrades. Starting with the size. We no longer have a slider, but a 3 option switch. That is a downgrade in itself, but it gets worse. Obviously you want to set this to large, but large isn't really large. Just for reference, this is how the maximum minimap size looks in Battlefield 6. And this is the maximum minimap size you could have in Battlefield 1. I guess they lost the tech, huh? anyway. Background opacity is slightly lower so you can see things behind your minimap. Cone and edge opacity might as well be 0, but I like to keep it visible at least a tiny bit, so this is what I picked. And now we get to the next tragedy. Not only is the minimap itself tiny, even when it's large, you can't even pick a specific zoom level anymore. What used to be 3 different sliders has now turned into 3 option switches too. 1 step forward, 3 steps back, I guess. For now I use the medium setting for infantry because I need some foresight of what's happening around my current objective, and for the vehicles you always want the highest one. And before I move on, I also want to mention that the function where you could switch between these 3 levels of zoom by pressing N on the keyboard during a match is now also gone. You have 1 zoom level and you better be happy about it. Downgrades, people. 3 downgrades. Yay! The infantry compass is a nice addition, unfortunately very badly placed in my opinion and therefore almost entirely useless. That's why I didn't change anything here, because I constantly forget it even exists. For the crosshair I increased the intensity. In this case that's not glow, but actually a thin black border around it, which helps to set it off against the background even more. And as you can see on the snow example on the right, that helps quite a bit. The color is pink, just like the vehicle HUD before, and I also increased the thickness because I like to have a clear crosshair at all times. We have talked about this projection bullcrap before, this has to be off. Now these hit indicators can be quite helpful at times, and as you can tell I don't like the default stuff. I dropped the opacity a bit so they don't cover anything, but I increased the intensity because just like on the crosshair it makes them a bit sharper. For the hit color I don't like regular white, instead I go with red. For the headshot color I like orange, and for the eventual kill I like green. If you haven't caught on to it yet, this theme basically resembles a traffic light. Red, keep shooting. Orange, get ready to move on soon, and green, you are good to go. I like it and it works. Coming down to the damage numbers, I should mention that these take on the hit colors we just changed. So that's another reason to not use white, because that is just harder to read. I increased the size and I changed the placement so that they are straight below my crosshair. This not only makes it hard for them to cover anything relevant, it also places them right on top of your gun, which in turn makes them a bit easier to read. The damage indicators are the hit markers you see when you get shot, so I pick a bright yellow for both of these because I can just see that better. And down below we have the chat options. I just made it more transparent and slightly adjusted the position, but that is all personal choice. Moving on to the campaign page. I haven't touched anything in here, although it might be worth mentioning that there is a skin you can unlock when you complete the campaign on the highest difficulty, so I guess you could change that. And now the next chapter would be the controller, but as I told you in the beginning, I don't have anything to recommend here. At least not for actual controller players. However, we will get back here for a brief moment after we are done with the next page. Before we move on though, I would like to recommend another YouTube channel to my console viewers. I have been watching SMK Gaming for a while now, and so far his work seems pretty solid to me. He did multiple breakdowns of the aim assist at this point, and I think it will be worth your time to go check him out. He should be able to help you with your controller settings way better than I ever could. You can find the link to his channel in the video description down below. Tell him I said hi. But now let's talk about the mouse and keyboard. We did the sensitivity before, so let's take a deeper look into these control settings. First thing you want to do here is turn off uniform soldier aiming just for a second, because we'll have to switch something else off further down below, which we can't when this is on. Before we get there though, let's talk about the field of view. The general rule is a higher field of view makes the game feel faster, makes recoil appear less, and enables you to be more aware of your surroundings. A lower FOV makes the game feel slower, recoil appear harsher, and you have less spatial awareness, but enemies will be larger, which makes it easier to spot them at a distance. Personally, I prefer the first option, and because I have an ultra-wide screen, I go full ham all the way to the max. This might look a bit weird on regular monitors, so should you mind that, I would recommend to go for something in the 100 to 110 range instead. Ironically enough, different to popular belief, this has essentially no effect on your performance at all. So if that is what's holding you back from going higher, it really shouldn't. Down here we reach the zoom transition smoothing. Turn this off. And all the way at the bottom, I would recommend to pull this slider to the maximum. I will get more into the tricks you can do with this in a future video, but for now just know that there is a button you can map that makes you turn 180 degrees in an instant. Well, almost. The slider we just set to 200 is what makes it basically instant. More on that in the Keybind chapter and an upcoming video. Now let's scroll back up because we have to turn on uniform soldier aiming again, and now we have to talk about this new coefficient slider. By default this is set to 178. That number is related to the aspect ratio of a 16:9 monitor, because if you divide 16 by 9 you get 1.7777 etc. If you would have a 4:3 monitor you would then set this to 133, and if you have an ultrawide like me, a 21:9, then that would mean you would set this to 233. Now that's all good and dandy, but the actual value I would recommend is simply 0. This makes your aim the exact same across all zoom levels. It's the best for muscle memory and in my experience just overall. I have been using this since Battlefield 5 and I don't think I'll change it anytime soon. Back out here again, we would have to talk about the keybinds now, but since that is probably the most boring part of this video and also quite tedious, I have decided to push that all the way to the back. So for now let's skip this and dive into the vehicle portion. We covered the sensitivity before, so let's open up the control settings for the vehicles now. Here we encounter uniform aiming again. Thankfully we don't have to do the up and down thing from before, but there is one thing to consider. Vehicles don't have recoil to control, or really any flick shots you could pull off. Therefore putting the coefficient at 0 might not be the best way to go, so maybe turning it off or setting it to one of the other values is actually better. But for now I have it at 0 to keep it consistent with the infantry. I just haven't spent enough time inside vehicles yet to give my final judgment on this issue. And here we have the vehicle field of view. This should always be maxed out. There's quite literally 0 reason not to do that. And at the bottom here we encounter the flick look again, just like before, increase that speed to 200 to make it almost instant. Moving back out again, we can see that the rest here is all keybinds, so we are going to skip all of that for the moment and turn back around to the controller page now. In here I want to edit the control settings submenu. Most of this should be mirrored from the mouse and keyboard part, but we want to change a few things. Turn off uniform aiming again, make sure both of these ratio sliders are set to 100 and turned back on, then make sure both aim assist sliders are set to 0, and a bit further down the acceleration slider too. Back out one step and do the same thing for the vehicles. Turn off uniform aiming, put the ratio sliders both to 100, turn it back on, go down a bit and slide aim assist and acceleration all down to 0, and that's it for the controller part if you are on mouse and keyboard. Honestly I have no idea if this actually does anything in Battlefield 6, but it did in 2042, so if you don't use any controller ever, this can't hurt anyway. And now we get to another really important section, the graphics. Before we dive into these submenus, I want to make it very clear I am not a tech YouTuber, far from it. And because I am not, I want to recommend someone who is. If you watch my settings video for 2042, you should already know him. Game Guides did the testing for that game as well, and he has done a similarly outstanding job for Battlefield 6 too. Of course his channel is also linked in the description down below. And I highly urge you to go watch the settings videos so you really get a clear understanding of how much each option will cost you performance wise. Go check him out, it's worth it. What I will show you now is not a recommendation, but just my takeaway from his videos based on my system and personal preference. With that out of the way, let's dive into the graphics quality settings now. Texture quality on high, texture filtering on ultra would be what I use if there wouldn't be another bug. I did some quick research and apparently there is an issue with the VRAM that only seems to affect some higher end Nvidia GPUs. So if you have an AMD card, this doesn't apply to you. But for Nvidia customers, right now, the VRAM apparently just keeps piling up and never clears, which results in a drastic performance drop after like 2 or 3 games. And I personally could experience this firsthand. It went from a somewhat comfortable 140 FPS to 110 in the second game, and then to around 90 in the third, and if I didn't restart the game at that point, it could even drop as low as 70 after a few more games. And that's without mentioning the micro stutters that came along with this performance drop. Apparently you can somewhat avoid this by putting both texture settings on low. That's what I have done, and it did indeed help quite a lot. Obviously I hope this gets fixed rather quick and then I would use high and ultra again, but I am not even sure if this can be done on EA's end or if this will require a driver update from Nvidia. Guess we'll see. Mesh quality on low, terrain quality on low, undergrowth quality on low. That one apparently doesn't do anything, but even if it did, I would want it to be on low so I can see people easier behind bushes. Effects quality on low, volumetric quality on low, lighting quality on high, local light and shadow quality on low, sun shadow quality on medium, shadow filtering on PCF, PCSS looks like dog shit honestly, reflection quality on low, screen space reflections off, post-process quality on low, screen space AO and GI off, and high fidelity object amount on ultra. This is the only setting that should always be on ultra, no matter what you pick for the other ones. Leaving the submenu now and entering the advanced settings here, I have Nvidia Reflex set to enabled. Apparently this also isn't actually working at the moment, but I don't want to remember changing this later, so I'll leave it on and hope they just fix it someday, maybe all in one big driver update. A man can hope. I also have anti-aliasing turned off and DLSS turned on with the balanced preset, and at the bottom I switched on this little performance overlay so I can tell how bad it really is. Back out again we have a lot of returning things, but also two new ones. Vignette and film grain. Both annoying, turn them off. And all the way down at the bottom I made some small changes. To the recommendation of game guides, I run this game in the borderless mode, which apparently improves latency. Who would have thought? An additional neat side effect is that tabbing out is also faster. I also turned off VSync because I have a G-Sync capable monitor, and apart from that you should obviously make sure that the resolution is correct. That's it for the graphics. Moving on to the audio settings. I talked about the main volume before, this depends entirely on your setup, and although I actually like the music, I have to turn it off because it would interfere with my video production. For the ultimate sweat settings, I guess turning it off would be the way to go anyway. For the sound system, I usually would recommend 3D headphones or spatial 3D if you have access to it. However, since the last patch, both of those options have a weird tinny sound to them which wasn't there before, and it just makes the game sound horrible. So right now I just use the headphones preset. I have been in contact with one of the audio developers for a while now, and he told me that they are working on an overhaul when it comes to the footstep sounds, which is good to hear because those suck ass right now. And I guess the only thing we can do until that overhaul comes along is to set the audio mix to night mode. What this does is it makes all quiet sounds a bit louder and all really loud sounds a bit quieter. Obviously this can help a tiny bit with this issue, but it's more of a band-aid. I do not recommend to keep this once they fix the footstep sounds. But right now this is the best we can do to make them at least a bit more noticeable. Once they patch it, I would personally go with the high dynamics mix because I have really good headphones, but the default mix should be fine too. And I know some people really love war tapes, and especially the new version, which I like to refer to as the Crusade tapes, but that's just not for me, and I'd like to keep my hearing beyond 30. Background audio off so it doesn't annoy me when I tap out. Music and menus, irrelevant for me since I have turned it off anyway, but maybe you don't want to constantly hear that when you are fiddling with your weapon setups between matches, but you do want to hear music inside the game. For the voice chat I haven't done a whole lot, I just disabled the ducking because I don't want my game to get quieter whenever some console moron coughs onto his controller, but I do want to be able to at least hear if a random is actually calling out something. That's why I also enabled the gain compensation, so if their mic is pretty quiet, they get a slight boost in volume. I also keep all radios turned on just for the occasional vibe. And now it's time to move on to the last major section of the settings, the system. In here you can separately uninstall the Battle Royale if you aren't interested in it like me, or the campaign when you have finished it, whatever you desire. I don't really have anything to say for this entire portion otherwise. You could enable the command console here if you know what that is and want to use it for something, but apart from that there's actually only one neat little thing at the bottom here I did enable, which shows you the ping of all players on the scoreboard. Also a legacy feature now, I guess. No idea why this is not on by default, but yeah, there you go. Now you can tell if the hacker is Chinese again. You're welcome. Before you restart the game now to apply the graphics settings you picked, we cannot forget about the keybinds. So let's navigate back to the mouse and keyboard tab and start with the infantry stuff. A quick disclaimer before we go over these, I use a German keyboard. That means my Y and Z are switched. So keep that in mind when you see those somewhere. Also, I have a mouse with 3 thumb buttons, one of which is mapped to be just the number 5. So whenever you see 5, that is actually the 3rd thumb button on my mouse. With that out of the way, let's see what we got here. The first change I made is I cleared the mouse part of the ping because I want the mouse wheel press for something else, namely the flick look backwards all the way down here. So when I press my mouse wheel, I turn 180 degrees in an instant. Pretty neat. Then I have crouch hold on the left Alt key right next to the spacebar because I just prefer it that way. Toggle crouch on X because that's how it used to be in older titles. And then I use scroll up for my primary and scroll down for my secondary because that is way more convenient. And obviously I then unbound scrolling from the cycling here. Then I flip the mouse buttons for the gadgets around because it just makes more sense to me in this order. That reflects the way the buttons are ordered on my mouse, the exact same way the gadgets are listed in the UI, and I put the class gadget, which is the ammo box, crack pen, tux and blowtorch, on 5. Remember, this is my 3rd mouse thumb button. I also unbound the toggle laser and or flashlight because that will make you cycle through all different states. Instead, I bound toggle laser and toggle flashlight both to T, so they are either both on or off. Fire mode on V, because that's what it used to be in past games and I like consistency, and a Battlefield Classic steady scope also bound to right click, so whenever you ADS you also instantly simultaneously hold your breath for perfect steady aim. This is a must for every sniper main. Last 2 things are the scope zoom level toggle, which I put on F because you cannot melee when you ADS, so this works just fine, and I put the bipod deploy and mounting on C because that is just convenient and still available. That's the infantry keybinds. Now let's move on to the ground vehicle driver ones. In here I have bound the big map to F. This will be a reoccurring theme throughout all vehicles, and it's because the big map can give you quite a lot of information at a quick glance, but M is just too far away. And especially inside an aircraft you don't have any time to search for keys. It has to be instant. I also unbound the mouse wheel press from ping again, pretty much for the same reason as before, and here I put left Alt for the crawl speed because it fits the crouch equivalent on infantry. And again, I like consistency. The handbrake has to be spacebar, no idea why they changed that. And then I unbound V from lock turret and set this to the mouse wheel press, because this is essentially the free look for ground vehicles. And at the bottom here I unbound spacebar from firing. I also unbound the switch weapon stuff entirely, put the scroll up and down to the primary and secondary again, and for some reason the mouse buttons for the equipment here were in the right order from the get-go. Weird. And that brings us to the transport vehicle driver keybinds. Again, F for the big map, handbrake on spacebar, unbound wheel press for pinging and put it in for the flick look backwards. Next up, the aircraft pilot keybinds. Now, these are a bit more interesting. I will make a separate video about flying at some point, but you can consider this a sneak peek. First thing you want to do is bind the exit to something else than E, because that is just dangerously close to WASD and we don't want to bail on accident. I picked T here because it's still easy to reach, but unlikely to be pressed unwanted. Also, F for the big map of course, and for the pinging 2 changes this time. Not only did I unbind the wheel click, I also changed it from Q to 5. That's because I use something for maneuvering called rifle aim for pilots. This basically makes your crosshairs work just like it would on infantry, but for jets and helicopters. I'll get more into detail on this in the pilot guide, but for now you will just have to accept this. You want to have the yaw on your mouse moving left and right, as well as on Q and E, and you want your pitch up and down to be on your jump and crouch button respectively, so for me that's spacebar and Alt, as well as moving your mouse up and down of course. And then you want to have your roll on A and D and unbind the mouse. The rest here is just regular stuff by now. Free look on wheel press, unbind the weapon switching, put scrolling up and down to primary and secondary weapons. And now we do the same thing for the helicopters too. Exit on T, big map on F, ping on 5 and unbind the wheel, yaw on Q and E and mouse moving left and right, pitch to spacebar and Alt as well as your mouse moving up and down, and the roll to A and D and unbind the mouse. Also unbind both of these assist ones here. Free look to wheel press, unbind weapon switch, scrolling up and down to primary and secondary. And that's it for the helicopter. Now the gunner. big map on F, unbind wheel press from pinging, bring wheel press to flick look backwards, unbind spacebar from fire, unbind weapon switch, bind scrolling to primary and secondary, and here we have another equipment slot that's on the wrong button, so I switched that to the other one. One last submenu and we are done. DUI keybinds. In here I just unbound the wheel press from ping again, so nothing overlaps, and I also unbound the clear pings because that is on T and I don't think I will ever use that feature ever. Maybe it makes sense for the battle royale, but for multiplayer this seems completely useless. I really hope I could help you in any way with this video, and if I did, I would appreciate a like. Yes, that does actually help with the almighty algorithm, and let me tell you, I hate saying this more than you do hearing it. But you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. And if you feel really generous today, feel free to share this video with a squadmate of yours that's still running around with the god-awful default settings. Also, if you want to see more videos like this one, maybe even consider subscribing. Whatever you choose to do or not, thank you for your time. That's it for today, and I will see you on the battlefield. Sorrow, out.